today is a gift. And I'm fortunate. I just turned 65, and I've been fortunate enough to be here as long as I have. And I don't know whether I'm going to be here another day, a year, another 20 years. But I look at that every day, and I think just make the most of it.
A few months ago, I turned 46 years old, and a weird thing happened. I realized that I may have already lived half of my life. This then caused me to really reflect on where I've been, where I am now, and where my family and I are headed in the future. Then, as fate would have it, around that same time, I learned that my good friend George Saiz was planning to retire as President of AME, and I immediately knew I wanted to bend his ear to see what I could learn from his successful career. And since I have the great privilege of hosting this podcast, I asked George if he'd be willing to pull the curtain back and share his story on the show. Thankfully, he agreed, and we had a fantastic conversation that I know you're going to enjoy. The show notes for this episode, which will include links to everything George and I talk about, can be found over at gembapodcast.com. Just look for episode 274. You can also check out Gemba Academy's Lean Learning System, which, among many other things, includes courses on 5S, the 7 Ways, and value stream mapping. Simply go to gembaacademy.com to learn more. Okay, enough from me. Let's get to the show. All right, George, welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Good, Ron. Thanks. It's happy to be here.
Yeah. Good to have you on. So as I mentioned in the intro, you were previously on. My goodness, it's been a few sleeps. It was July 2016. You were on in episode 121, and I believe this was first few months as the AME president. So That's right. Interesting. We've had a few years in between, and we're maybe on the other side of that bridge, so to speak, right?
Right. Just a lot happening, and a lot has happened during the 3 years. And as you know, I've announced my retirement, so we'll be moving on. But it's been a great experience here at AME.
Yeah. Well, when I saw that announcement, I reached out to you right away because I wanted to pick your brains on, obviously this is a show we talk a lot about continuous improvement and lean, and I thought, I'm sure that's gonna come up here today, as it always probably will when you and I talk. But I'm as we've talked about before we hit record, I'm just genuinely interested in hearing from George just some of your wisdom from your career, and just maybe the various phases of your career. Many of the people listening right now we're working, and I'm 46, so I got another however many years to work,
right.
So, but it's interesting. Just the older you get, the more aware you are of, what am I going to do when I grew up one of these days,
Right.
Well, you've grown up, George, so we want to know.
Yeah. We went fast.
Yeah. But before we get into that, George, kind of like we always like to begin our shows with our guest sharing a quote. So do you have one that you want to share? I
do. It's a quote that isn't necessarily was not meant to be lean, but it kind of pictures lean to me, and it was from John Wooden, who's a real hero of mine, and he's the legendary coach of the UCLA Bruins, who won 10 national championships back in the 60s and 70s in college basketball. Mm-hmm. But his quote is just very simple. It's "Be quick, but don't hurry." Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was something that stuck with me, and I've used it. I use it when I played sports, but I also have used it in business, and I think it really pictures actually lean very nicely as well.
Mm. That's very powerful. I mean, you could think deeply on that a long time. Be quick, but don't hurry. Yeah,
right.
Very good. All right. Well, George, again, if folks haven't listened to episode 121, that might be kind of fun. They could go back and give that a listen and come back to this one.
Sure.
But just in case folks didn't hear that one, I'm going to probably not ask you to share your background because, well, I think that might be part of your story. So why don't we just kind of jump right in and maybe we'll look at your career, George, of in phases, maybe a early, middle, end, or something like that. And
Sure, yeah.
So how did it all start, George?
Well, my start in business really kind of began very unceremoniously. I was hired by a startup medical device company in Southern California that made heart valves from pig hearts. And of course, I when I was interviewing, I said, "You actually have a business doing this?" And I was very naive at the time, pretty young, and my title was General Helper. And
General Helper.
General Helper, and I was thrilled because the job paid 25 cents over minimum wage. So that's kind of tells you where I was at that point.
Yeah.
But it actually began a career in medical device that spanned over 40 years, and so I got in and loved it and got the privilege of being able to stay there, and it was really, really neat to be in that business. And you're making products, but when you're making products that really help improve lives, that was even just a real bonus. And so being a startup company, it was we really had a lot of great learnings there. We just experienced really, really rapid, I'd probably even say maybe even chaotic growth as a startup company. And in fact, about 3 years into my time there, we actually had a ceremony for all employees where we buried the back order. And so we'd been living with this back order over our heads. Demand was so high. We actually had a coffin and at a ceremony. We buried it in an adjacent orange grove behind our plant, and then celebrated with a catered lunch. So it was a fun place to be. The company growth was really fast and furious. When I joined, there was 80 employees, and we grew up to about 550, and we added buildings and warehouses. So, but about 5 years in, we were acquired by Johnson & Johnson, and life changed dramatically. So very quickly, I and all of our employees got to learn the corporate way of life. And after a couple of years, unfortunately, sales went south. And a couple of years down the road, we'd actually gone from number one in our space to listed in the grouping of others in terms of market share. And our employment went down to about 175. And so after learning all the things to scale up a business very quickly, I learned all about layoffs and cutbacks and cutting costs. And so, it's kind of like the butcher. Nothing's ever wasted, and all those experiences are good in terms of business. And so, you take that and you try and learn from it. And then near the end of my time there, we were merged with another J&J division, and then ultimately sold off to Medtronic. And crazy enough, we took off again. And when I left, we were back up to over 500 employees, and I know that it scaled up to about 1,000 employees at that site. So it was a lot of things to learn. In all, I spent about 14 years there, and during that time, I was fortunate to have about 7 promotions. I think I had 7 different supervisors, and we went through 6 company name changes, so we got really good at that. And I completed my bachelor's degree at night, and my progression took me through purchasing and materials, and ultimately left there as a materials manager. So going in as a general helper and coming out as a degreed materials manager. So a lot of great opportunities for me. Some of the lessons I learned during that time was really to ask a lot of questions and to keep learning, and most importantly, be ready when opportunity calls. You just never know, and I would advise that for anybody young in their career. Sometimes you're looking for that next opportunity, and you think it might never come, and if you're not prepared when that door opens, you might miss it, and you just never know. And maybe just a quick little story. Remember when I was a purchasing supervisor, I had two folks that worked for me. They were admin / expediters. Back in the days, we had expediters, and they both wanted to become buyers, and they didn't have the education, and I encouraged both of them to enter into a local purchasing certificate program, and one did, and one didn't. And so the one who didn't said, well, you just hired 2 new buyers, and they're probably not going anywhere soon. And, well, they actually did go somewhere soon, and the one who completed the certificate moved into a junior buyer role and ultimately progressed on up, and the other, well, missed that opportunity, and more of them after that. And so, for me, I learned and saw that for me, and then, was shown in this case, you really have to be ready when that door
Yeah.
opens. You don't know when it is, and if you're ready, sometimes you get to jump right in, and if not, it'll pass you by, and you don't know when it'll come back to you.
Yeah, I recently read, I can't even remember which book it was, I read a lot of books, and they were talking about how some people say, well, these people just, they're always lucky. George is always lucky, in his career.
Right.
And the idea was that, it's not these people who are successful. Yeah. What looks like luck is often, preparation and perseverance meets opportunity, right? And if you're not prepared for the opportunity, then you can't get lucky, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, so I want to talk one thing about throughout that early part of your career there. You talked about you're booming and everything's great, and probably, everyone's big lunches and parties and whatnot. And then all of a sudden the bottom falls out and we're laying people off and all that. Unfortunately, I've even been through that, when I was in the mobile phone business there for a while and a couple different mobile phone companies and same thing, it was booming, money's just falling into our laps. And the next thing you know, it's like not. And there's some incredible, emotions. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Like, how did you cope through those times of uncertainty, fear, I'm sure? Talk about that phase, because that's not a fun phase of your career, I'm sure.
No, it's not, and it's something. Of course, I was younger in my life, so I had a wife and a young family that's starting up, and you're thinking about that, and of course, you're seeing folks that you've worked with, and basically, we grew up together at that company, and now they're losing their jobs, or you're in a position where you're having to make that decision about who stays and who goes, and that's a really tough time. And for me, I think I relied on my faith to help get me through there, and just ask for wisdom and help me to be sensitive to what these other folks are going through. I was fortunate to be one of the survivors, but you realize when you call somebody in, you're changing their life. They're going to have to go home and tell their family, I don't have a job anymore. And so, and again, I took that just as a learning experience, and I think that's something that you don't. It's not a pleasant thing to go through, but certainly you learn how to treat people with dignity and respect. It also helps you to look at the future when you're booming, of how do you do that under control and not lose that edge. And we can't always predict the future, and we can't control that, but certainly it made me very mindful of there's nothing guaranteed for the future, and we have to be careful about even when you're in high growth, that how do you manage that successfully, and watch out for some of those speed bumps out ahead of you.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe beyond that, moving, as you said, maybe by phase. After I left that company, I went to a company and had some really good success very quickly in a short time period, and it was really by focusing on team building and working together with the folks that we had there. But again, suddenly an opportunity was opened up to me, and I was fortunate enough to go from director of materials role into a division general management role within a company called Zimmer, who's a major player in the orthopedic medical device market. And so again, opportunity happened to come up, and I don't think I was completely ready, but the door opened, and I said yes. And of course, as you got to be careful what you ask for sometimes. This division that I went to was a smaller division. It had been a dominant leader in its market. At one time, I think it had about an 80% market share, but it had fallen on tough times, and it was now down to neck and neck with another major player, and we each had about 35% of the market. And but we were falling quickly. The quality was really problematic. We had about 30% out-of-box failures for instruments, and these are surgical instruments, the surgeon's using. So when he goes into surgery, and the first thing he goes to do is cut with it, and it breaks.
Not good.
It's you don't want to be in that room. Mm-hmm. And we had back orders for about 60% of annual sales. All of our folks in Lean will appreciate it. Inventory was over a year on hand, so we had too much of the wrong thing. R&D was dead, and even our financial reporting systems were really inaccurate. So almost everything was broken there, and we weren't in great shape. And so for me, it was pretty eye-opening. Every time I turned over a rock, 10 cockroaches went out there. We were trying to step on them, and we just kept finding more and more wrong, and trying to figure out how do we right this ship. And our corporate group had just acquired a company out in the East Coast, Raleigh-Durham area, and they had three different sites in the country that manufactured very similar products to us, and but it was in a different medical application. And so their VP of Ops set up a one-day workshop he called the Goals Seminar, and based on the book by Eli Goldratt. And I received an invitation to attend with a lot of other people throughout our group of companies. And I read the book and all about one-piece flow. And I have to be honest with you, it did not make sense to me. I could not figure that out. I thought that's just not logical. You need to batch these things together and just crank through them. And so I went, we did the workshop, and by the time we got into that afternoon Lego simulation, all of a sudden, the lights went on for me. And when I left that meeting, I got copies of the slides, and I went back to my company, and actually over 6 months, I took every one of our employees through that workshop, and personally, and launched our Lean initiative. And of course, back in that, it was about 1992, so it wasn't called Lean yet. And so we were in trouble, but we knew we needed to do something drastic. And about that same time, the general manager of one of those other three sites that made similar products was sent out by our corporate group to see if he could help our engineering department solve some of our problems and help us get off back order sooner. And so, I found out about a month or so after he'd been helping us out that he was actually told that if he could solve our problems, they would essentially close us down and move our products to his site. Wow. And so, that hit me, and I thought, well, we had developed a very open dialogue with our employees, in that time, and I shared this at an all-employee meeting, and I thought, we've got to be very transparent, and everybody needs to know where we're at. And so, we all had a burning platform that we were all standing on together, so that worked well. We developed what we called an operating credo, and it was simply teamwork, quality, and speed. Our future depends on it, and we all got behind that credo. And to cut to the chase, before we start our implementation, our work order throughput time from opening a work order, picking materials, assembling, inspecting, packaging, and putting it in finished goods was about 3 to 4 weeks. And mind you, this is an instrument, and while it's very sophisticated, very pricey, it only had 13 parts, and 6 of those were pins. So, I'm looking, thinking, this has got to go faster. Well, we also had a service repair business, and repairs were taking about 3 months. So you can imagine how happy the doctors were that their favorite instruments were sitting in our shop for 3 months. And so, once we got done re-engineering our processes, our throughput time on our new product went down from 3 to 4 weeks to an average of 2 hours from start to finish. Wow. And our repairs went from 3 months to guaranteed 24 hours, and about 60% of those were completed on the same day we received them. So quite a dramatic turnaround. Our quality and delivery went up to like 99.9%. Out-of-box failures were eliminated completely, and our sales took off again, and ultimately we tripled our sales, and we more than tripled our pre-tax income. So our employees were really, really, really engaged at this point. It was really a fun place to be. And really the kind of fun part of this story, Ron, is that the other company who made similar products, their 3 manufacturing sites, they actually all got shut down, and one by one they were moved into our facility. Wow. Including the one that was led by our quote helper. So after that, I just became a complete avid believer in lean, and I just saw the complete transformation of both the people and the company, and it was so powerful. You can't deny that. There's nothing I would ever do different than that after seeing what happened with our company. So we got to live through quite an experience there.
So was it more just like kind of lean, traditional lean, go one piece flow, workplace organization? What did you guys do? I mean, I know we'll have to get into the great detail, just high level.
Yeah, we did everything from soup to nuts. I'll tell you that one thing that really helped us early on was that we were in the process of moving to a new building. And I will say that our old building that we were in like 3 suites that were patched together. And of course, you start in one, then you grow to another, and you grow to another. And if you looked at the flow, it was like a ping pong ball going, around. And I think we probably had enough space if you could ever, and I think many businesses are like this, if you could take everything and put it out in a parking lot, re-engineer your building and then put it all back in, it would probably work. But in our case, we were moving to a new facility, anticipating some growth in the future, or hopeful for that. And so we got to really think about what we were doing and how we were going to do it in the future, and relay out everything from start to finish. And so we did look at the entire flow from beginning to end of the building. But beyond that, we had just a very young, energetic group. And I would say this is there's probably 2 teams in my life that I've worked with that were just unbelievably great and fun to work together, and this was one of them. And so everybody got behind this, everybody worked together, and we were on the same agenda. And so I'll go back and I'll talk about that a little bit later, how important culture is. But that culture was so important. And it was funny. I know that when we went through our ISO certification process, the ISO folks, auditors, asked our employees, so what's your quality mission statement? And they really didn't know anything other than teamwork, quality, and speed. Our future depends on it. And they would just cite that, and everybody would say that. And the auditor said, that's so simple, and everybody really understands what that means and have subscribed to it.
That's so awesome. So I remember, quick story.
Yeah.
I won't name the company, but we did the same thing, and we had this quality policy that was like, oh my gosh, it was like I had like memorizing a poem,
Right, exactly.
Oh my God.
This was simple. And yes, we did all the things. We went to Kanbans and went to a complete pull system from finished good Kanbans to stock Kanbans, eliminated work orders, and just back flushed out materials, and really just had one piece flow, and a lot of folks cross trained, and so it was a fun time. We reinvigorated our R&D and got that going, and also got ISO certified, built up all the quality systems, and so, but it was just a fun group of folks that really wanted to do it, and luckily enough, our corporate group was headquartered in Florida. We're out in Southern California, and they really gave us full autonomy and a lot of space. Luckily, I had a gentleman that I worked for that went in and really paved the way for us, took the pressure off all the back orders, and said, they're going to get it fixed, leave them alone, and we did. We were left alone, and we got to just focus on turning this business around. And quite frankly, it was about a year after we started our lean implementation that we turned around and offered all of our we call it the 48-48 program, and we said you'll get your new instrument in 48 hours, and you'll get your repair in 48 hours, or we'll give you a free one, and or we'll give you your repair for free. And so we very quickly had to back it up. But yeah, it was just a great group.
Now, how long did that phase of your career last? What was the timing on that?
I was there for 7 years.
Okay.
7 years, yeah.
Nice.
So we had just a good time. So that was kind of I would say kind of the middle of my career, and I had a few other opportunities, but maybe the last area that I could share is my previous employer and my time with AME, and having the opportunity to serve as president in both roles. And And by this time, lean's kind of become a way of life for me. And I think the most important changes that I've seen during that time for me, and that I've seen in lean in general, is the focus really on culture and leadership. And I'll tell you, here at AME, when we run our member surveys, the top four, which are pretty much saying the same thing, that come back, are always culture, leadership, engagement, and then the thing that our title here, people-centric leadership, we'll put those on there, and those are the top four. And if you put them, all together, it's the super number one thing that folks are really interested in. And for me, I had always put culture first. I was a real big believer that you could do that mission and vision and values, and you could put them up on the wall, and you could put your strategic plan up on the wall, but if you didn't have the culture to execute it, it was just a bunch of nice words up there. And so I thought I was always very focused on culture, but I had the opportunity to spend some time with Bob Chapman. You probably heard of Bob, who's was the president of Barry Waymiller, and for your listeners, the author of a great book titled Everybody Matters.
Yep.
And what I learned from Bob is that we could be even more intentional about the culture we were building. And after spending some time with him, I really reflected on what we were doing. And we were doing a lot of things. There were a lot of activities and a lot of focus, but much of our culture was really dependent on events. So I'd say it was very episodic in nature. And so I really wanted to explore how we could build it into everything we did and make it every day, and not waiting for some great event. And we had a lot of those things, whether they were all employee meetings or picnics or parties or charity events or all kinds of different things and recognition programs. But I really thought we need to find a way to make sure it's in everything that we do every day. And so at my last job, we actually developed a cultural goal statement that was fairly simple as well. It was for our employees. It was engaged when we are here and fulfilled when we go home. And we said if we could achieve that, that would be a very, very special environment, because every company is asking for engagement, and I think that's the company part that we want from our employees. We want them all to be engaged, but from the employee part, I think we think of their perspective as being fulfilled when they go home means that they've had a great experience, and probably when they get home, they're going to be a better husband or wife or father or son or daughter or whatever their different relationships are. But it isn't just about engagement and what the company gets, but it's what the employee gets, and that sense of fulfillment when they go home each night.
Yeah.
And so I've really seen that. And in my time with AME, I think there's more and more companies I hear and see that are focusing on leadership and culture. And I've, in my role here, I've got to go out and see some of these companies and see their facilities. Companies like Goodyear, the racing division is a huge transformational story, and Cambridge Engineering, Mark Braun and what that group has done together there, they really spent a lot of time on culture up front, and then started introducing the tools of lean. And the same at Goodyear. When I was there, Goodyear worked on respect. They had very tenuous relationship with their union, and they worked on respect and safety, and turned that around. And a great testament of that was at our conference in San Diego this last year. They were a recipient of our Excellence Award. Mm-hmm. And on the stage, there were, I think there was about 6 people up on stage, and 3 of them were the union leaders, and 3 were the folks representing management. And so what a team. And then even Neptune Technology Group down in Alabama, they've done, another company that's done a great job of putting culture first. And I think when they do that, they build such a deep sense of respect and trust throughout the organization. And once that's established, then the tools of lean are going to go in kind of like greased lightning in my mind. Yeah. And I really think it's going to be much, much more sustaining. And so I would, if somebody asked me what to do if they're first starting out in their lean journey, I think before we used to always say, so many people started with 5S and try and get a little success and that people will believe in, and you're trying to convince people to change. And I think if you can take the time to develop a culture of respect and trust, and that may even take you years, I think it's worth it, because that foundation, is really the perfect foundation for the kinds of things you want to do with lean or with anything. And you have that opportunity to not just be, I'll use a term that Colonel Arthur Athens has said in the past, not to become just a great company, but an extraordinary one. And that's what these three companies that I mentioned earlier, I think they're very extraordinary in what they do. And there's a real focus on culture, leadership, and on putting people first.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last question I have for you, George, we throughout this episode, you've given a lot of advice, in various phases of your career there. So, before we hit record, you and I were chatting, and I've personally been thinking a lot about life after work kind of thing. I'm 46, so I've got many more years to work, obviously. But it was interesting that you had even mentioned, I think, before we hit record, that turning 45 was a major turning point for you. And I'm wondering, what advice do you have for me and for all the people who are listening? Not just lean and this and that, but just in general, as a person, I always said, speak to us as a father, because you've grown up, George, we're still growing up.
Well, I've got some, there are probably statements that certainly you've heard in the past, and that is, don't take yourself too seriously. And there's a young man that I met many years ago. He was, I think 26 years old and dying of, I think, of leukemia. And he was sitting before, it happened to be a men's group at our church, and he was sharing, and he was looking at us, and I was just just one row back from the front, and just looking at him, and he was just saying, just enjoy each day. Don't take it for granted. You never know. And he passed away about 3 months later. And actually our church started this fund, and they had a flyer on it. So I've kept that flyer. And every morning when I get up, before I start my day, one of the things I do is I pull out that flyer, and I think about that today's a gift. And I think about that young man. I'm fortunate. I just turned 65, and I think, he got 26 years to live, and I've been fortunate enough to be as long as I have, and I don't know whether I'm going to be here another day, a year, or another 20 years. Fortunate, my parents are both in their 90s, but I look at that every day, and I think just make the most of it, because you don't know, and we sometimes get focused on all those little things, and I always think about, well, 20 years from now, am I going to really care about all those things that I'm fretting over today? But every day is a gift, and we need to enjoy it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for that, George. And I keep thinking of, as you were talking there, our mutual friend, Richard Sheridan, of Menlo Innovations, and Richard's work on, joy, creating joy in the workplace. And I see that in friends and family, and there's some people who exhibit just joy in their life, and then there's some people who just don't seem to have a lot of joy in their life, and I'm often found, what can I do, to help foster more of an environment of joy? Instead of blaming people for saying, why are you so miserable? It's like, well, what can I do to help that person? So perhaps that's a challenge for all of us, right?
Sure is
to find a way to be a light, right? And to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, George, I really am thankful that you came on to share your story. And I know you're retiring and all this kind of stuff, but I know you too well. I think you're gonna get bored, so I'll probably have you back on the podcast here in another year. We'll talk about your how you're applying lean to your golf game or whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to, Ron. I really appreciate the time here too. Thank you.
Hey, so let's say we haven't done our traditional plug for AME, but we're in the summer of 2019, and we got a big conference coming up. So tell us a little bit about AME Chicago.
Well, we've got some the usual great lineup of keynote speakers, including Tom Peters and I mentioned before Colonel Arthur Athens, who's one of my favorite, probably my favorite all-time speaker that we've ever had, and he was in Dallas, and he'll be back, and we've got a bunch of great tours and workshops and sessions coming in. I know that we actually even have some things very targeted at healthcare and government. The state of Illinois has been involved in their rapid results program, and they're going to be sharing what they're doing. So it's going to be quite a wide mix of all kinds of things. One of the tours that they've actually offered up is of a jail where they've applied lean, and so that's going to be very interesting for folks to go see. But it'll be another great event. It's going to be a little bit later. It's going to be in that early part of November, so a little bit later for us, but here in Chicago. And it'll always be those are always a great mountaintop experience.
Yeah. So November 4th through the 7th, and so AME.org, I guess, to go get your registration. And Gemba Academy will obviously be there. It's the biggest lean show in town, as they say.
Yes,
in the world, I think, right?
The world, yes, it is.
So yeah, we'll see you there, George. And thanks for everything. And enjoy your retirement, and congratulations. Very well done.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate it. Well, come see me if you're ever in San Diego.
All right, I will. Take care, George.
All right, bye-bye now.
Thanks for listening to the Gemba Academy podcast. Now, we invite you to take a no-strings-attached, fully functional test drive of GembaAcademy.com. Gain immediate access to more than 1,000 Lean and Six Sigma learning resources, all free of charge, at GembaAcademy.com.